Welcome to Priority Traffic Podcast, a haven where heroes meet, not to speak of battles, but to strengthen the armor of mind and spirit. This is where you, the guardians of our community, come to refuel your inner strength and sharpen your resilience. Every day, you give your all to protect others, and this space is dedicated to you, offering reprieve, support, and strategies to survive the demands of your noble profession and thrive within it. In every episode, we unite to tackle what it means to be a firefighter beyond the fire ground, delving into the essence of personal wellness and professional endurance. We believe that we can forge a path forward toward a fulfilling and sustainable career through open dialogue, shared wisdom, and heartfelt encouragement. Together, we'll explore topics and tools to empower you to manage the heat that comes with the job and to emerge stronger. Join us as we champion your well-being and amplify the power of the community. Welcome to your turning point, where growth is the journey and excellence the destination. Welcome back to Priority Traffic Podcast, where we light the way to wellness and growth for first responders in our community. I'm your host, Chris, and I'm here to empower and inspire you on your journey of excellence. As first responders, we have faced unique challenges every day, from intense situations on the front lines to balancing the demands of our personal lives. It's crucial that we prioritize our well-being and build sustainable careers. This podcast is all about fostering a sense of community while providing you with actionable strategies and resilience building techniques. We believe in the power of authentic discussion, where we can openly talk about the challenges we face and our experiences, knowing that we're not alone in this journey. Today, I'd like to welcome my guest and new friend, Chris Littrell. Chris, welcome to Priority Traffic Podcast.
Thanks for having me on the show, Chris. I'm happy
Absolutely.
To be here.
You have 25 years of experience in the first responder and military community, and I know you reached out to creating a show with me, so if you don't mind, give the audience a quick introduction of who you are and kind of what inspired you to reach out and make this possible today.
Yeah, thanks. You know, I started in the Air Force back in 1999, and I was a young married guy at the time. We were 20 years old, my wife and I chose security forces, which is the police force for the U.S. Air Force.
Okay.
Served around the country. Obviously, I was, working on the job there during 9/11, which was, a huge change in our warfighting posture as a country.
Yeah.
Prior to 9/11, we were relatively at peace and really hadn't been at war other than some skirmishes here and there. My wife I missed both of my oldest daughter's first birthday, and that was probably the driving force in us getting out of the Air Force. We enjoyed the Air Force life, served with remarkable people, and I wanted to be there for the big moments. So around 2004, we started testing for police jobs all around the state of Washington. We're born and raised in Eastern Washington, where we live now. And I got a job over in the Seattle area at Linwood Police Department. Served there for a couple years. Then I lateraled over here to Kennewick. And really what motivates me to share aspects of my wife and my story is the tough times. Being a cop is remarkable. So I hear some folks that have left the job, and I don't blame them for feeling this way, but I've heard some people say, "Oh, I can't recommend that for anyone. It's horrible." I disagree. I think being a first responder, and in my perspective, being a police officer, was absolutely remarkable. And even with the post-traumatic injuries that I've had to work with or work through, I wouldn't change it. The only thing I would change is having a better understanding of our brain and a better understanding of how to manage the stress. Because for me, it was the death scenes and the child abuse stuff that really ate away at me.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a lot of things. I mean, I was on our SWAT team. I was a school resource officer. I eventually was promoted to sergeant. And so I had lots of opportunity to do different jobs, but I was the stuff of going into a gang member or a drug dealer's house with our rifles out to serve a search warrant. That's not the stuff that bugged me.
Sure.
That was fun. It was the child abuse cases and seeing the vulnerability of our young folks, and then the death scenes. They really bothered me. I think I think it was really the loss. I mean, you step into a death investigation,
Mm-hmm.
and usually you're surrounded by the family who is mourning their loved one. And that hurts because there's nothing you can say. There's nothing you can do to fix it. Your job is to investigate it, to see if it's a natural death or if it's a homicide, to try to solve this crime.
Sure.
And it just got overwhelming for me. A couple different times in my career, I got overwhelmed and did some things to heal up my brain. And then eventually here in 2023, I had to medically retire just because it was just too much. I just couldn't take in anymore. And so that's my motivation now, whether it be through engaging police officers, first responders one-on-one, if they reach out to me and we're, have some kind of connection, or if it's me actually doing some work, because I have a consulting business that I go around the community teaching some of the same things, leadership and wellness and whatnot.
Right.
But that's my motivation, is helping our younger generation of first responders, firefighters, paramedics, dispatchers. Let's not forget them.
Yeah.
Corrections, police officers, helping them do it better based on the training and the information that we have now.
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful motivator when we suffer a little bit and we kind of make our way through it. And from my experience, I can't speak on your behalf, but I feel like I'm healing through what I've experienced, and it seems to be part of the process to where we start helping other people. So as a fellow first responder and someone who's continually trying to grow and go through that, we appreciate having people like you who are stepping forward out of what I would call the shadows, I guess, and saying, hey, this has happened to me too. Here's what I did, and maybe we can work on this together for you. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I don't think you're far off saying stepping out of the shadows, because we're a whole lot better in 2024 than we were in 2005 when I started.
Sure.
As a civilian police officer, but we have a long way to go. We still have a lot of work to make it so that people don't have to feel like they're in the shadows, to be afraid of raising their hand and saying, hey, something isn't working right here, and I need some training to heal up.
Mm-hmm. It really makes me wonder if we're bringing people into these services trained up enough, or at least giving them the right tools. And that was one of the inspirations for my podcast, is to start discussing the stuff that, excuse me, that we as first responders should have in our toolbox, like almost within the first year. I know, like as a firefighter probationary, we are trained and we're expected to learn a lot. And it's a lot of technical skill and job related ability, but nobody has ever told me to, or not told me, but sat down and taught me, hey man, you're going to need some stress mitigation tools. You're going to need some resiliency tools. And those all look different for everybody, but at no point has someone told me, hey, this job is stressful and you're going to need to learn how to offload that stress. Otherwise, you're going to end up with an injury that you can't see.
Yeah. I think it has to start from the date of hire and the date that we go to the academies.
Right.
Think about a professional athlete. So I ran intercollegiate track and cross country in college.
Oh, wow.
And it was not an option. After practice, you ice bathed.
Right.
It wasn't an option to do the therapeutic things to help our bodies recover. It was a mandatory part of practice.
Yeah.
It wasn't an option when we visualized our race and controlled our breathing. Our coach would take us into a gym, turn out the lights, tell us to lay on our back. It was part of programmed practice for him to train us how to be in control of our brains and how to heal our physical bodies.
Yeah.
We have to get into that mindset with the first responder world. I think what this would look like is part of our academies. I get it. We're limited on time. But if we're going to train firefighters how to attach a hose to a truck and how to fight a fire, and if we're going to train police officers how to search a building, we're recognizing those are critical functions, critical steps in the job. We have to recognize that taking care of our brain due to the unnormal volume of trauma and loss that we experience, taking care of our brain is so important that we're going to train every day. We're going to start our days off with meditation practice and training them how to control their breathing. We're going to end our days with doing a debrief from the day and doing some breath work. And if we truly believed this was important, like across the board within our professions, that's what it would look like. And that's the only way that I think we're really going to see a sharp change in the suicide rates and in the people leaving the job due to a mental injury, is when we get serious about training our people.
Yeah, first off, I'd love to come to that academy because over the past probably 6 or 7 years, I've realized how important those are to me. And
Yeah.
and it's funny because you can mention it, but in a lot of fire settings, unless you're talking about high performance and where this is common talk, and it's not common in the fire department, but meditation, breathing practices, visualization, running through, getting those visual reps, those are techniques that are underutilized, and they produce positive results. And it's just funny to me. So I'm glad you said that, and I really appreciate that. And there's this, it's almost like a stigma where we don't want to do those, what I've kind of determined as soft skills. Like nobody wants to go do yoga because there's a perception. And 20 years ago, you'd get called all sorts of stuff for doing that. And now it's like, man, an hour and a half of moving and breathing, it changes my entire day.
Totally. I agree.
So let's take a step back real quick and kind of talk about what motivated you to become a service member, to put your life on the line for other people, because I know that's who we're talking to, and it's a very common step in life to want to provide service, and I think it's very fulfilling. And then you step into this role and you're like, holy cow, this is a lot more than I bargained for sometimes.
Yeah. My choice to join the Air Force was largely impacted by my brother, Chad. He's a Air Force veteran, also with security forces, and he is 4 years older than me. And so he had already completed his enlistment when I made the choice to join the Air Force. And so, I mean, hands down, he was the one that influenced me to join the military. I have great grandfathers that had served in the military, but no one and some uncles and whatnot, but no one in my immediate family recently had served. And then the choice to join the police force. I'm a third generation cop. My grandpa served in California as a reserve officer back in the 60s. And then my dad was actually a general manager for a beer company, and in his mid 30s when he wanted to make an impact on our community, right? Like he was making money and he was the boss, and he was like, you know what, this isn't meeting my inner desires. And so he became a police officer. And back then you weren't making a whole lot of money. And so I remember us going to eating a lot of macaroni and cheese and top ramen, which I loved. So like life was good for me, right? But we were eating cheap food because we took a pay cut as a family. And it was watching my dad's career and then me volunteering as a police explorer when I was in my teenage years that kind of gave me that that itch, that desire to do this job. And you know, it's really a team sport. I'm sure the fire service is very similar.
Yeah,
it's a team sport, and I grew up playing sports throughout my middle school and high school, and then getting into college days. And I love team, and so. It was a natural draw, especially after I served in the Air Force for 6 years. It was a natural draw for me to apply for and eventually get hired as a police officer.
what do you think is one of the advantages of someone like yourself? And I know from my experience that I'm a team guy too, like not special forces team guy, but someone who thrives in that team environment where people are playing roles, supporting teamwork, camaraderie. What do you think it is that attracts us to that?
I think there's a couple of things. First of all, that this inner desire, and I hear this from a lot of first responders and folks in the military, this inner desire to be part of something bigger than ourselves. The Army years ago did this whole campaign of an army of one, because they were watching our society at the time, and there was this shifting attitude from tribal to individualism. And so they tried that as a recruiting tip, and it miserably failed, which I'm glad it did.
Right.
Because they realized that, hey, even though that might be our larger societal culture, that's not the people we're going to attract. We're going to attract the people that that we're on the football team, and that we're in band and choir, and that we're part of these collective groups that we're trying to do something bigger than just themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why it attracts us, is just because of that inner drive to be part of something bigger than yourself, and the recognition that when you get a collection of people together, we're going to be able to do so much more as we join together as a team than we would be able to do even if you added together all of our individual accomplishments.
Absolutely. So if that's the case, just purely out of left field, would you say that a team that shares a value and a mission statement and a vision and goals is going to do better than a team that is kind of lacking clarity on those topics?
100%. Now, some organizations don't have strong mission, vision, and values. Some of them, it's really wall art. And I teach this for Washington State for first level supervisors. There's a block of instruction on having a good mission, vision, values, and that's what I've seen a lot. Is it's wall art. However, it doesn't have to be.
Right.
And even if there isn't a strong organization mission statement, like most organizations have a mission statement. But if you ask people within the organization, hey, what's our mission statement? Most people aren't going to know what it is.
Right.
And again, I'm speaking from my experience of asking a whole bunch of first level supervisors, people that have been on the job for 5 to 30 years, what's your mission statement? And most of them don't know it. And it's because as leaders, it's not permeating throughout our organization. We're not using it for awards and for evaluations. We're not using it when we do use corrective discipline or coaching and counseling. We're not using it at the hiring date, during these ceremonies and whatnot. If we incorporate it into all those aspects of our daily life, it really can be this North Star. It really can be this thing that guides us as an organization. And so whether it's formal and in print and on the walls, or whether we as teams, as smaller teams, so within the firehouse, maybe your fire station, within the police force, your squad, if you don't have a strong organizational one, get together as a group. Hey, why do we do this? Why does our team do this? And hopefully whatever you come up with can reflect back to the organization mission statement. But again, if that one's so irrelevant and was done 15 or 20 years ago that it just doesn't connect, then come up with your own. Now it does need to connect to your core job as that organization. We can't be in the fire service and police service and say, well, we really just want to create an online store and create really cool coffee cups and have a YouTube channel. No, that's not our core mission. We do that stuff on the side and let's have some fun. But it really has to point back to, why the community pays tax dollars for us to exist.
Sure.
And when we have that, I think it's going to create more of that esprit de corps and just that connection and that desire for us to show up the next day.
Absolutely. That I couldn't agree more with you on that. It really brings in the team. It tightens the team up. It aligns the vision. It aligns our purpose for the day. Like on the fire truck, I know if all four of us we're showing up, we're slept, we're well rested, and even if we're not 100%, maybe 85%, if we all have that same vision for the day, hey, we got the stuff to do, we know what we're here for, it actually elevates and makes it a little bit, actually a lot more enjoyable for a team environment. How would you say that having a personal mission statement in life is valuable? Because I know I put one together when I started going through what I would call my awakening or my healing process, and I found that it to be very, very important to me, and I lean on it a lot. What would you say?
I'm 45 years old, and I've gone through some different seasons in life where I'm kind of going, what am I doing? What's my purpose? And I mean, I really went through that here recently as I retired from the police service. And I mean, just asking that question, what is my purpose? And so, yeah, I think it's really can be powerful. Now, it can have different names. Like instead of a mission statement, my family came up with core values.
Yeah.
My wife and I, we knew what we thought we should have, but just before we told our girls what it was going to be, we had the epiphany that, hey, maybe we should ask them.
There you go.
And the beauty was they came up with the same stuff. They just called it different. Like instead of using integrity, they said we need to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And so we came up with these family core values.
That's awesome.
And we did use them. We used them when we were correcting them. We used them when we were celebrating them. And honestly, it's kind of fallen off now. I would say our oldest two daughters probably got the most of it because it was brand new at the time.
Sure.
But we're still living by them.
Right.
It's just we don't put it on all of our pictures that we hang around the house like we used to, you know. And then for me, as I transitioned out of the law enforcement world, I had to ask myself, and the difference is I didn't call it a mission statement. I really went to that Simon Sinek, start with why.
Start with why.
And I asked why do I exist right now? And I beat it up for a little bit and journaled about it and whatnot. And finally I got to, I want to captivate audiences with truth. And I wanted something that applied in all areas of my life. And so as a dad, I want to captivate my girls. I want them to be drawn in to relationship with me and to conversation with me. And I want to engage them with truth. And a piece of that is my faith as a Christian. A piece of truth is what is true about what's going on in the news and us getting carried away with all of the drama that sometimes gets stirred up. A piece of that is the truth about the fact that it's going to be 68 degrees today and you're wearing winter clothes. You're going to be hot and sweaty.
Yeah.
So hey, sweetheart, you might want to go put an undershirt on because you're going to want to take that sweatshirt off when you're at school. And so it really, I love it. And then when I go out in the community and train people or give talks at law enforcement agencies or even engage one-on-one officers who are struggling, I'm going to captivate them with truth. That truth may just be me listening because that's captivating. Actively listening to another person, man, that makes them feel heard. Empathizing with them, wow. This sounds really overwhelming. That is captivating. And then the truth, brother, sister, I've been there before. Maybe not exactly the same, but I've been there before. And I'm just telling you, you're normal. And the things you're going through are normal to the not normal stuff we see and do. So take a breath and feel normal. And let's start talking about what you can do to help your brain heal. And so, getting back to your core question, are individual mission statements important? I think they are. Whether you have a why, whether you have a mission statement, whether you have core values, I think they can help you with the ups and downs. Because if you're a first responder, you are going to be subject to a narrowed window of tolerance. We go into this elevated state every day we go on the job and we're dealing with life and death. And we're in this elevated state and it feels good. And there's adrenaline and cortisol and it's flowing through our bodies and it's almost addictive in some ways.
It can be.
And then when we go off the job, for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. So instead of going back to the window of tolerance in the middle, kind of a green zone, a lot of times we'll dip below it and we'll almost be apathetic and just checked out. I saw it on my dad.
Okay.
My dad is a good father, one of my best friends. And as a kid, I saw him go into apathy where he'd sit in the chair, turn on the TV, and you couldn't get the man's attention unless you screamed at him. And he was just in his brain, and I do it. I knew that, and I've tried to counteract it. And sometimes I can,
Sure.
but it still happens. It's biology or physiology. I don't know. And then eventually, hopefully we return to that window of tolerance. The problem comes is as we do this job and we go up and down and up and down, it's not normal for our brain. And our window of tolerance gets more and more narrow.
Okay. And
now when my kid spills milk on the floor, I yell. I scream at them over spilling milk.
Right.
Who cares? Take a breath. I'm not talking to everyone else. I'm talking to me. Take a breath, Chris.
Right.
Have your child come over and tell them it's not a big deal. Everyone spills milk. Let's clean it up together. Right.
Yeah.
And we're teaching them a bunch of different things. Let's not sit there and scream and yell. The sky is not falling. And so the beauty of it is even though our jobs cause our window of tolerance to narrow just naturally.
Why do you think that is?
Because it's not normal for us as humans to go into these heightened states over and over and over again. On the police level, Dr. Kevin Gilmartin talks about it in his book, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement, and he calls it the hyper-vigilant roller coaster.
Nice.
It totally applies to dispatchers and firefighters as well.
What is the name?
Come on, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. Okay. So I get it. Some firefighters might be like, "Hey, that doesn't apply to me." Trust me, it applies to you.
For sure.
Some of the details or the examples might be a little bit different, but biologically, the things are going to be happening in your body the same way, to where you're going into this heightened state, you're dropping down into a state of apathy. And if you do really good stress management skills, that can be mitigated, and you can kind of shortcut and hijack that from happening and get back up into your window of tolerance. And actually, as we do that, we actually can grow our window of tolerance.
That was my next question.
Yeah. So there's the good news is, if you notice yourself yelling at your spouse, if you notice yourself yelling at your kids, if you notice yourself driving aggressively and having these triggers, and you're just like, wow, my gosh, take a breath. It's really normal.
Right.
You're normal. That's why it's happening. And there's something you can do about it. But what you need to do about it is you need to train yourself. You need to get into some training, whether that be yoga, whether that be meditation, whether it be breath, whether it be prayer, whether it be physical exercise, journaling, going to a mental health professional, letting them coach you. It's not help. Let's not even call it therapy.
Right.
It's training.
Training.
They're going to train your brain and your body how to handle all this stuff. And as you train, your window of tolerance is going to, just like in cross country, as I trained, my endurance increased. Tearing of muscle, building of my endurance system, I was able to do more. Well, the same goes for all of this stuff. For training our brain, you will have a greater capacity for resiliency, kind of a buzzword right now.
Right.
Your window of tolerance will increase, and you won't be screaming over spilled milk. You're going to see the spilled milk, and you're going to take a breath, and you're going to be like, hey, not a big deal. Let's clean this up, Junior.
Yeah, the training aspect, when I think of the training and all of these skill sets and mindsets and tools we can use, it reminds me of the quote, and I can't think of who said it, but you'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And that's really stuck with me when I've taken my philosophy to my mind and my body. Maybe not the external stuff, but internally, because whatever's happening within us is a reflection, and we're going to see it outside of us a lot.
Oh, all the time. And my wife would say that she saw it on me, especially over the last few years, but really probably over the course of most of my 25 years in public service. She would see it on me, and she would read it, and based on what she read, she would act differently.
Really?
And this is kind of heartbreaking for me as a husband, knowing that my wife was having to play zone defense. But I would come home, and if she saw it on me, she knew I needed to keep the kids quiet. Not me, but she needed to keep the kids quiet. Because if they started fighting with each other, or if they disrespected mom, I was going to lose it, and I was going to be screaming. And so, our loved ones see it. She didn't tell me about it, though. She kept that secret because she didn't want me to know that she could read it. She wanted to still have that in her back pocket, and that way she knew how to show up as mom and as wife right now. And now, through all of this, through me going to a PTSD recovery center this summer and continuing training my brain to get better, we have a lot of conversation now. And now when she sees it, what she'll typically do is she'll reach out, she'll lightly touch my leg or my arm, and she'll say, "How are you doing?"
Right.
And it's caring. It isn't like, "Dude, what's your problem?"
Right.
"Chris, you're driving 10 miles per hour over the speed limit right now. What's going on?" She doesn't attack me with it. She gently touches me, and she just asks, "Are you doing all right? What's going on?" And a lot of times I'll be like, "Oh, wow. You saw that?" She's like, "Yep, your driving's communicating it to me, sweetheart." And then I'll sit there and get curious. And sometimes I know what's going on. I'm actually playing through something in my brain.
Okay.
Other times I have no clue. And I actually have to think through, I'm jacked up right now. Okay, late models Honda. I've arrested a lot of people out of late models Hondas, and I just saw one in front of us dynamite the brakes and take a hard right turn. Oh, I went through a stale green light, and I know sometimes people will blow intersections and T-bone cars at stale green lights.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I can get curious and figure out why I'm jacked up. Every once in a while I can't, and then I just got to fall back on my breath work and talking to my wife about it, cathartic ventilation, to kind of work through some of those big emotions.
So it sounds like your wife is really in tune with a lot of what's going on. Like, she's not just someone who's, and maybe she is inherently gifted with the ability to be empathetic and notice and be an active listener, but these are all skills that you're mentioning that I personally believe that I wish I would have heard in the beginning of my career, emotional intelligence, those type of things, because not only professionally, but what matters most, I think, is our relationships at home. And it sounds like you guys are into something really healthy. Do you mind explaining how you guys kind of got into that together? And I know it has a lot to do with the mental health struggles that were precursors to that, but can you open that up for us a little bit?
Yeah, really. I mean, there's so many different things, right? We've been married for almost 26
Yeah,
years.
amazing.
So I'm going to try to give you like the snapshot
Sure.
just for me shooting at the hip here. Reflecting back, our faith is going to be a big piece of it because of my Christian faith, it tells me how I'm supposed to engage my wife. It says I'm supposed to love my wife as Christ loved the church. So whether someone's a Christian or not, just go with the analogy. The Bible tells us that Christ died on the cross for our sins. So we have a sin problem. Christ died on the cross so that we'd be forgiven. Mm-hmm. So if I'm supposed to love my wife like that, you don't even have to believe in Christianity. But if that's the measure that you're supposed to love your wife, you're supposed to lay down your wants for your wife and your family's needs. And I mean, there's a command for wives as well in there, in that same chapter in Ephesians. But as a husband, as a man, that's the way I'm supposed to love my wife. Well, I have certainly not done that perfectly, but that's a foundation for me as a husband, the way I'm supposed to engage my wife. My wife is supposed to respect me. My wife is supposed to submit to me. Again, people don't like those words.
Sure.
But if I'm laying down everything for my wife, isn't that just mutual submission?
Right.
It's us submitting to each other, and I think people can hear that.
It's reciprocal.
Exactly. So that's where we're supposed to start. And then, yes, my wife is gifted with being a good listener.
Sounds like it.
When we get involved in a conflict, neither one of us are listening. Right now, we're trying to win.
Right.
But my wife has a greater skill set in listening and discerning than I do.
Okay.
She has a better emotional intelligence and better EQ than I do. I've had to grow in that area.
Sure.
And then it's just taken a lot of practice. I mean, I would say for at least 16 years of our marriage, when we would have conflict, I would be confronting her right now. And I'm like, let's deal with it right now. And she would be saying, Chris, I need space. I need time to think about it. And I wouldn't give it to her. I would pursue her until she would have to physically leave the area or jump in a car and drive away. Because, and my heart wasn't wrong. I was trying to resolve the conflict. I didn't want us to continue to be in conflict. So let's keep talking about it until one of us is right.
There's like attachment styles there. There's weird things that from when we were young children that make that happen. Anyways.
Yeah, totally. And so that was something we had to learn.
Yeah.
I had to learn that my wife needed time to reflect. That is her natural personality state. Whether you take an anagram or a Myers-Briggs or a DISC, personality assessment. With all of these, they're going to tell me that my wife needs time. If I force her to talk right now, it's going to involve cuss words and her stabbing me in the face. Right? I don't want that. Give your partner time, whether it's the wife, whether it's the husband, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is. Give them time to reflect. And then when you come back, you're probably both going to be more emotionally intelligent.
Sure.
I actually like the word emotionally qualified to have this conversation, and it's going to go so much better. So through trial and error and through me failing in that and me pursuing her, we've gotten a whole lot better at both being able to communicate with each other. Hey, right now I'm not in a good spot to talk about this. Can we wait a half hour? Can we wait till tomorrow morning? So even when we don't resolve conflict, we usually have this mutually agreeable time that we're going to try to readdress it. And then more recently, and I'm skipping over a bunch there, but
totally
more
fine.
recently, I had a buddy give me a tool. And it's a very simple tool. If you remember, I can't remember if it's Lord of the Flies, one of the books we read in high school, but all the kids that had the conch, they had that shell. And the only ones that were allowed to talk is who was holding the shell.
I think that's Lord of the Flies.
Not talking over each other. Well, I had a buddy of mine. He works for an organization called Stronger Families. Okay. And one of their tools is this thing called a couple log. And all it is following the rules of Lord of the Flies. When one of you has the conch, although we don't actually use any type of physical implement, when one of you is the speaker, the other one does nothing but listening. Like truly listening. Not listening so that you can come back with a really good follow-up and win. Yeah. You don't want to. You're on the same team as your spouse. You never want to win against your spouse. You never want to beat them. You want them to win because if they win, you
Right.
win. And so we started using this tool, and it was kind of awkward at first because it looks like this. You're talking, Chris, and I'm listening. You get done talking, and I empathize with you. I'm like, so what you're saying is you feel like I'm not listening to you. And when I said that, that hurt you. Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Wow, that sounds really tough. If I were in your shoes, I would feel the same way as you feel right now. And then you affirm me. Yep, that's exactly what I said, and that's how I feel. And then I'm going to ask you, is there anything more you'd like to say about this? And if there is, you keep going, and we keep reciprocating with, I summarize what you said, I empathize with you, and I ask you if there's more. When you are completely done talking and you say, no, there's nothing more, then we switch roles. And now I'm going to talk. And I'm not talking to beat you.
Right.
I'm not talking to say how you felt wasn't right. I'm just going to tell you what this whole experience has been like for me. And then you're going to do the same thing. And the first couple times we did it, like honestly, even though we were in conflict, I'm like smiling because it's awkward to be using this thing.
It's a tool, right? It's awkward and clumsy.
Yep. Chris, we don't even have to pull it out anymore.
That's awesome.
And we use the phrase that Stronger Families uses. You don't have to use that phrase. But what we say is, hey, should we do a couple log on this? And yep, we should. And then we jump into it. And we have not had a failed conversation since we've been using this when we're using the rules of the couple log. We've had plenty of failed conversations over the last 7 months. But when we do it, it's because one of us is trying to win, or usually both of us. We're not listening. We aren't empathizing with each other. And so those are some of the things that we've done to get to where we're at now. And we still got more work to do because we don't do it right every time. And because we're still having some breakthrough conversations of things that we haven't talked about for the last 26 years.
Sure.
And part of why we haven't talked about it is my wife didn't feel safe in talking about it with me. And in some cases, I didn't feel safe sharing some things with her. And so, yeah, I really encourage listeners, whether you do this with your spouse, your significant other, whether you're doing it at work with your partners, your teammates, really listening to each other and making sure that we understand where each other are coming from is critical for us to be a strong team.
Absolutely. So when you mention all those elements of the listening, it brings to mind active listening for me. And I know there's a lot out there on that, but I highly recommend anybody listening, if this sounds like something you're struggling with or you'd like to get better at, or just professionally or personally, you want to grow a little bit, learn about active listening and start becoming a good listener and what it means to be a good listener. And I bet a lot of your relationships will improve.
Oh, I agree. And there's a talk, I'm trying to think, it's a TED Talk. It's a gal that's a newscaster or whatever for NPR. And she talks about active listening. She starts her TED Talk with all that stuff you've ever learned about active listening. Forget all of it. It's crap. And her point of it was kind of funny at first. Like, well, that didn't help much.
Right.
But her point of it is you don't need to look like you're actively listening if you're actually actively listening.
Right.
So her big point of it is keep your mouth shut, keep your ears open, and then much of what the couple log taught me. Listen, empathize, don't try to win in the conversation. Just try to understand the other person's perspective. And if you do that, people are going to love talking to you. People are going to be like, wow, that Chris Warden guy, that Chris Littrell guy, he's so amazing. And you may not say a thing. They think you're amazing and intelligent just because of the fact that we're good at listening and we're good at understanding where other people are coming from.
Yeah, that has a lot of power. When you can see somebody and you can let somebody say what it is they need to say and you can validate them and you can make them feel heard, that does something for them that you can't really explain, but they feel it. And I know from my experience with my wife that that's the case, and I'm getting better at that as well. What would you say is some advice you would give to somebody on the professional side of things that is really struggling to start bringing these conversations to their peers, or, battling that stigma of, hey, like I was kind of nervous to tell you this morning that I had that panic attack at altitude, and what panic attack or altitude sickness, whatever it was, like part of me was like embarrassed to bring that up, but I knew that this is exactly where I should do that.
Oh, completely, brother. Well, let's say this. I was supervising our peer support team before I left the job and retired. So it was embarrassing for me. Like I'm the guy I'm the peer support guy.
Hmm.
Like I'm the health guy.
Yeah.
And even regionally here in my area, amongst the peer support team supervisors, I think I was kind of like the senior ranking one with how long I'd been doing it
Hmm.
for about 15 years. And so it was really humbling. Like I'm not the guy that's supposed to have the problems. I'm supposed to be the guy that has this all figured out.
That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, but I think doing exactly what you did this morning, just let's acknowledge it. Here's the deal. It is not normal to experience death or threat of death to yourself and to other humans at the volume that firefighters, dispatchers, EMS, police experience it. This isn't normal. And so if you're choosing these jobs, first of all, you are a hero. You are courageous. We need you in our communities. And no, you are going to have problems. It, you're not a superhuman. There are no superheroes.
Right.
Athletes don't go into the NFL expecting to not have physical injuries. They know they're going to get injured at some point. That's why teams have docs and physical therapists and ice baths and all these other things to heal up the body when they get injured. You're going to get injured. And you're not going to like get injured once and then be like, all right, cool, I dealt with that. It's all better now.
Right.
Well, I mean, maybe you will. And if you do, I like it because it probably means that you've now incorporated a whole bunch of great training and healing practices into your life that's helping you mitigate those small injuries so they don't turn into big injuries. However, my guess is a lot of us are going to experience it a few times. You're going to be really good for 5 years or 10 years or whatever.
Hmm.
And then you're going to have an anxiety attack and you're going to be like, whoa, where'd that come from? And you're going to have to get curious and explore. All right, I thought I was dealing with stress well.
Hmm.
What's going on? Why did I experience that? And if you get really curious with it, you'll usually be able to figure out, wow, I had that one call at work and then I had a conflict with boss and I've been having conflict with my spouse and my kids. I'm worried about my kids right now.
Right.
And you'll probably be able to figure out the layers. But I really feel like, one, give yourself a bunch of grace. If you're afraid to talk about it, give yourself grace. Take a breath, give yourself grace. And then if you're a senior firefighter, a senior police officer, you don't have to be a person of rank. One of my first squads as a sergeant, I had a 30-year cop on my squad, and everyone respected him, including me. He had been on the job for 3 decades, right? I mean, like that says a lot.
Yeah, that's experience.
And when he can come into roll call after a child death, and the next day go, guys, that I never liked those calls. Those are the ones that bother me, and I had problems going to sleep last night. How about you guys? Right now, you just normalized the fact that that call yesterday should screw us up a little bit.
Hmm.
And the fact that if I had indigestion, if I had conflict with my family because of the extra stress, if I couldn't sleep, right? Whatever the symptoms are, normalizing it so that we can all talk about it a little bit. Right now, everyone's going to walk out of the room feeling a little bit lighter. We're all going to walk out of the room going, I'm okay. That was actually supposed to feel like that afterwards. And we have to do that as leaders. I want to see our chiefs and our sheriffs do that. I want to see command staff do that. I want to see first line supervisors, whether they're captains, lieutenants, sergeants, whatever the rank structure is, dispatch supervisors. Let's start normalizing the way this stuff affects us. And you don't have to go into a long mental health and wellness talk. You don't have to sit there and know a whole lot about it. Just acknowledging it. This affected me last night. This affected me yesterday or during our 3 days off or whatever it is.
Sure.
And how about you guys? I think if we can start that conversation going, that's probably going to be the biggest piece to us changing our culture, because once we can normalize it across our organizations and talk about it, then I think us having the conversation of, well, then what do you do about it?
Right.
If it's normal, what do you do about it? Well, hey, I talk with a counselor weekly. I had one of the guys on my team just before I retired. We were having a talk, and I was telling them just before they went off on summer break and just before I totally lost it, I was telling them, hey guys, I need you to take care of yourselves this summer. You're not going to be in the schools. You get a little break from that. You're out on the road covering patrol calls. Take some time to take care of you and your families. And one of my senior guys, they were all senior guys because it was a specialty position. one of them spoke up and said, I talk with a counselor weekly, and I've been doing it for the last 5 years.
Nice.
And I loved it. I was like, brother, thank you for sharing that, right? Like, I can keep talking about it, but when you guys start also sharing it, man, now this is just kind of our team expectation that we're gonna take care of our brains and our bodies and our families. So
Yeah, that's the courage it takes to just start that conversation is a lot. And again, so just so everybody has a clear understanding, I was in Colorado. I had some altitude sickness. It put me into what I would call the relative symptoms of a panic attack. I woke up at 1 a.m. in the morning. I couldn't breathe. My SpO2 sats were down to 80. My heart rate was pumping along at like 105. I felt short of breath. I was agitated. I jumped out of bed. I sat down. I jumped out of bed, sat down, splashed water in my face, did all this stuff. And from being like 1 a.m. to 5 a.m., I could not get calm. I eventually, even with the help of my wife, I just focused on my breathing and did all this stuff. So that's when I brought this to you. I was like, man, I'm probably not the only one. This isn't something to be ashamed of. It's not something that has to be a secret or hidden, because I know for like multiple days afterwards, it was still impacting me. Excuse me. Like it was hard to fall asleep the first couple nights because I was afraid it was going to kick off again. And then my mental aspect started focusing on my heart rate, and it would go from like 70 to 80 to 85. And before you know it, I was spun up again. And once we got back down to altitude, everything started to calm down, but it still took like 2 or 3 days for me to get my O2 sats back to 99 at normal altitude, where I live. But I even told my wife, I'm like, this is embarrassing to say, but I feel like I had a panic attack. And part of me is ashamed and feeling this way about a panic attack where it really had nothing to do with me. But so I felt like that was a great example of something I wanted to share with you today, because we want to talk about the struggle of that shame and that stigma of saying, hey, I experienced this, and it's affecting me.
I wish we looked at it like other professions. My wife's a school teacher, and talk to any school teacher. What happens September, October, November every year? You get sick.
Oh, yeah, right.
You get sick because you just pulled together the petri dish of society, and you now have 30 new students times 5 times a day in the high school. So real quick math, you have 150 new human beings that are gathering together. You're going to share bacteria, you're going to share viruses, you're going to share all this stuff, and then people start getting sick with new stuff, right? Nobody ever goes, oh my gosh, why am I sick? I feel so embarrassed that I'm sick right now. Oh my, I should be better as a teacher. I should be stronger. No, you shouldn't.
Right.
Biology, science tells us that is going to happen. It's normal. You anticipate it, and then usually your immune system gets accustomed to this new, varieties of stuff, and you're healthy. And so the same thing goes for us as first responders. You're going to have anxiety attacks. You're going to have restless nights. You're going to have nightmares. You're going to have blow-ups at your family, and you're going to feel like a piece of crap after you do it. Take a breath. It's normal. Now, that isn't a license to keep perpetuating, especially the bad behavior type stuff. No. Give yourself a break, take a breath, apologize to your family, and then start doing the work to heal it up.
Absolutely. That's definitely the strategy is, shore it up, heal it up, and move forward with your family. Like this isn't something I didn't join the fire service to get a divorce. Like I thought being a first responder would be a very fulfilling thing, and it has been. And it challenges every aspect of our life more than I ever imagined. So
yes, and then you're going to fail. Like this last weekend, my wife and I are at the grocery store, and a worker is blocking half of the aisle. And I communicate to my wife, or at least I thought he did, hey, let's go this other way. And I waited for her to start going, and I in my mind I counted to 20, which I really counted to about 1.5. Because that's the way my brain works. And then I very abruptly, in a curt manner, grabbed the front of the cart and start yanking it the way I wanted her to go. And then we get to the check stands, and I realized, Chris, you were just a jerk. And I thankfully, my wife and I have somewhat humor in reference to this. And I looked at her and I said, "Hey, babe, you probably didn't recognize, but I was kind of rude back there." And she goes, "Didn't recognize?
Right.
Are you kidding me?" I was like, "Babe, I'm sorry." She goes, "It's okay. I forgive you." And so here's the deal. Like, I just went to spend a whole bunch of money on going to therapy, right? I'm doing all this counseling work. I'm not on the job anymore, experiencing all those stressors, and I'm still a jerk sometimes. And I might be a jerk for the next 50 years, but I'm hoping I'm a jerk less. And my wife sees the effort in me. She sees me really trying to show up as the husband and father that I should and I want to be. And so giving ourselves grace over and over and over again. You might have an anxiety attack again next week.
Yeah.
And then you may have one in 5 months. And then you may have one in 15 years. And you're going, whoa, where'd that come from?
Right.
It's okay. It's just the normal consequence of the jobs we do. Yeah. So within peer support, one of the things we're trained on is something called cathartic ventilation, which is just a super fancy way of saying the healthy way of getting it out. And so talking to people you trust about the things you got going on, both the good and the bad. I mean, like, let's celebrate stuff. I've talked with some folks that are afraid, and I've been in this category, that are afraid to talk about their successes. You know, I had an article published in Police One magazine last week, and there's a piece of me thinking to myself, man, if I talk about this on social media, it makes me look really arrogant, and then people are going to be judging me. You know what? It was a good article. And I sat there and was really vulnerable talking about some of my story. And so, you know what? I am going to talk about it. And if people want to hate on me because of it, hate on me. My hope is that the article will cause other people to get help. My hope is the article will cause other chiefs, sheriffs, commanders, fire service command staff to do a better job of taking care of their people, because that's what the article is about, is the way that my chief took care of me. So whether it's the celebrations, whether it's the struggles, talk. Don't talk to everybody. Not everyone gets permission to hear your story. You get to decide who gets permission and who you trust to share whatever version of your story that you're going to share with them. I had a mentor tell me that one time. I looked at him and I said, "Hey, I'm not sharing everything with you. I feel kind of guilty." He looks at me and goes, "Chris, I'm your mentor. You don't need to share everything with me. My job is to help you unpack stuff. So share with me what you want to. We'll unpack it. And go to your counselor. Share everything with her. She needs to hear everything. She needs to be able to really help you with all of the details. My job is just to help you with whatever we need to talk about right now." And that was really liberating. And I've carried that with me throughout the rest of my life. That was about 13 or 14 years ago. And not everyone gets permission to hear my story. But sharing your story, talking about the anxiety attacks, talking about the bad dreams, talking about the fact that you know that you've been misusing alcohol. I was doing that just before I went to PTSD inpatient. I was binge drinking on the weekends. Sharing that with people makes it to where it's not this dirty secret that you're ashamed of. Moving it into the light kind of takes away some of the negative power of it. You're like, wow, that doesn't feel so bad. I just shared it with someone. This happened to me at PTSD Recovery Center, and this isn't something I talk about very often because of some of the shame. Yeah, I think it's critical for us to move stuff from dark to light. And peer support world, they call it cathartic ventilation, the healing power of just getting stuff out. And so when we share our story with people that we trust, you don't go and share your story with someone on the side of the street. Don't go and share your story with the person at work that is your frenemy, right?
Right.
Share your story with people that you trust, and share the portion of your story with people that you trust. It's really freeing when we normalize, again, I know we've talked about this, but when we normalize the fact that, hey, I've been having these anxiety attacks, I've been having insomnia, I've been abusing alcohol, or, I've been drinking a lot of alcohol. So using the word abuse sometimes is even more, I don't really want to quite say that yet. I've
Right.
been having 20 drinks on Friday night. Okay, well,
Right.
that's kind of a lot. 20 drinks is a lot. Let's talk about that.
And maybe increased use.
Yeah, increased use. When you see increased use, well, let's say abuse though too, because
I
if
like
you're already
abuse,
having
yeah.
20,
Right.
if you're already having 20 drinks and then you increase to 21, you were already in a bad spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I'm speaking from the guy that was doing that. I'm not
Yeah.
judging anyone else. I'm speaking about me. It wasn't healthy. I knew it wasn't healthy. I knew what science said was happening to my body because of it. And I honestly didn't think I could stop. And it wasn't until push came to shove and I really needed to stop that I made that choice. But just the power of telling our story again, it moves it from dark to light, and it causes us to feel connected to other humans when they receive us. When I was at the PTSD Recovery Center, one of my struggles that I don't like to share typically, just because I still have a lot of shame with it, is my addiction to pornography. And a lot of the same things are happening inside of my body when it comes to cortisol and adrenaline and dopamine when I'm looking at pornography, as is what's happening when I drink alcohol.
Sure.
And I, the exercise we were doing, I can't remember what it was, but for whatever reason, now I'm sharing this with one of the women clients. I don't talk about this with women typically. I'm afraid
Right.
they're going to look at me as a pervert. And I share it with her, and she listens, actively listens. And she goes, wow, that sounds really challenging. She's like, thank you so much for sharing that with me. That helps me understand my husband better now. Oh my gosh. I felt connected to this woman, and not in an inappropriate way. I just was like, wow, she is not calling me a pervert. She just totally accepted me on probably my deepest, darkest secret that I can share. And it really facilitated me building relationships, not just with her, but with the entire house of clients. So yeah, us talking about things, us talking about the things we're ashamed of, the things that are going on within us, has this huge healing power that gets jump started when we move it from the silence and the darkness to talking about it in the light.
Yeah, I can completely agree, and I would double down on that. When we share those type of things, it's definitely a nice release. It's kind of like crying, right? Like there's no shame in crying. I know there's no crying in baseball, but there is no shame in crying. And that's one thing my wife and I mutually have kind of embraced together. Not we don't run around sobbing in public or anything, but when things get heavy at home and it's like I feel like I'm about to cry, it's like, well, what? Don't fight that, right? Like that's a process that has to happen. But like you were saying, there's something really important about letting that out. But as you experienced, you got to speak with someone who was exceptional at being the listener. And I hate to harp on it, but going back to that listening strategy, your listening book, your log, what was it called? Log book?
The couple log?
The couple log.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like when people are experienced and trained up as a listener. And we, as first responders, should, I think, learn how to be listeners for each other.
Yes.
Where that now we're working on ourselves by improving our listening ability, but now we're also becoming a very important tool for the guy in the car next to us, in the truck, in the back seat, the driver, right? And our relationships at home.
Part of the struggle comes, though, within our first responder worlds, we fix problems. That's our job.
Right.
House is on fire, stop it. Guy with a gun is shooting people, stop him.
Right.
And so as problem solvers, my default as a problem solver is to solve your problem. You're telling me that you're having relationship issues. I'm listening, and now I'm going to tell you how to fix it.
Right.
Tell you how to be a better husband, how to sit there and own your stuff, how to, and honestly, people don't usually need that. At least they don't need it at first.
Right.
If as first responders, you hit the nail on the head. Let's become good listeners. Let's just listen. Don't fix their problem. Don't fix it. The only time you're going to fix it is when, after you've listened and empathized and they feel heard, if they look at you and say, what do I do? What do I do now? Well, then that's when you go, hey, I got some ideas. I don't know if all this is going to work. You might need to filter some of this, but I got some ideas of what would work for me, and then share it with them. But I think that's what gets in the way sometimes of us really connecting with each other at work and at home is instead of actively listening, most of the time with good hearts, we're trying to solve the problem. Don't try to solve the problem. Just listen.
Yeah, don't try to solve the problem. Just listen. And that gives them the platform to speak. And as you said, that cathartic ventilation is important. The venting.
And sometimes they'll solve their own problem. They need you to listen so that they can get the words in their brains out of their mouth. But as they do that, they start hearing what they're saying, and they're like, "Oh, wow!" And then they look at you and they're like, "Hey, thanks a lot." And you're like, "I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything." And I've literally had people in my life that have said that to me afterwards. "I didn't do anything, Chris." I'm like, "Yeah, you did. You sat here and listened to me, and it
Yeah,
created the space for
exactly.
me to be able to figure out what was going on and what I needed to do about it."
Yeah, you mentioned the space, right? Holding that space for someone. And sometimes that doesn't include doing anything other than opening your ears and shutting your mouth and sitting next to them, even if they don't have anything to say. Sometimes you just sit with them, and that can do wonders for somebody who might need some help. What are some strategies that you would recommend for people who find themselves maybe a little bit outside of their zone, a little low when they're coming home? What can people start doing to to rebuild and get back into maybe out of the survival into the living, maybe the thriving?
Yeah. I think you're going to have to put some type of a training program into your routine. And I would love to see teams at first responder organizations do this. But if your team isn't, maybe you start doing it, and maybe by leading by example, other people will join in. Here's the thing: when I was getting done with work,
Mm-hmm.
like I felt guilty to stay at work for a half hour or an hour and work out. Okay, don't do it for a half hour or an hour. Go in there for 5 minutes and just push some metal.
Right.
Just do some pull-ups,
And do some
push-ups,
sprints.
do something to get that out. Maybe if you shower before, I'm going to give you something that we could all do, and it's 10 minutes or less.
Perfect.
We're going to add 10 minutes to the end of your shift. You're going to go in there and get your heart pumping just for a little bit. This is not really a true workout. You're just getting out some of that stress stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Go in, get out of your uniform. Some police officers like to drive home in uniform, which is fine too. There's a variant that you can do to do the same thing. But get out of uniform, take a shower, wash off work, both literally and metaphorically.
Mm-hmm.
Wash the work off of you. I believe in cold exposure. I don't take cold showers. I take hot showers, and then I flip it to cold for the last minute. And for that last minute, I do breath work.
Yeah, you don't have much choice when the cold water hits you.
Yep, I'm sitting there breathing in for 4 seconds. I'm holding it. I'm breathing out for 4 seconds. I'm holding it. And I do breath work. I usually only do about a minute. Now, I've
Okay.
done ice baths before. That's a totally different category for me. That's for the physical healing power in my muscles.
Yeah.
When I do cold exposure, usually I only do it for a minute or two. But now, if you already were taking a shower before you left work, all I've done is I've added 5 minutes of some type of workout real quick, maybe a minute for the cold shower portion.
Mm-hmm.
So we've only added 6 minutes to your day. Go to your locker, pull out a journal, write down like 1 or 2 sentences. Just write down a couple sentences on what the day was like. If it was good, write, great day, worked well as a team. If it was really bad, really got into it with so-and-so. Write down a couple emotions. We're not good at emotions. And I'm totally stealing this from Stronger Families. Stronger Families recommends this as a transition from work to home. They call it bridging the gap.
Yeah.
But just write some stuff down. Write down what happened today and some emotions. You can do that in a minute. So now we're only at 7 minutes. Write down 3 things you're thankful for. So end with gratitude.
Yep. Here we go.
And I am thankful that I'm going to go out into the parking lot and get in my car and it runs. I'm thankful for a running truck. Maybe your car's broken down and you're thankful for your partners that are going to drive you home right now.
Mm-hmm.
Thankful for the fact that I have clean drinking water. There's people around the world that don't get to turn on a faucet and magically have clean. I'm just thankful that I have drinking water today.
Right.
Spend another 20, 30 seconds writing down those 3 things that you're thankful for. Now, as we jump in our rigs and we start driving home, have a point somewhere in your drive where you are going to act a little silly. You're going to roll down your window and you are going to cast out the stress of the job at that point. A tree, a rock, the county line, a certain intersection, whatever it is.
Right.
And if you don't want to scream it out the window, don't scream it out the window. Say it out loud though. I'm leaving all the crap behind here. I will pick you up tomorrow morning on the way to work, but I don't want you coming home with me. And that external action it can start us in our brains in actually doing it. We haven't added any time because you're already driving home. So we're still at about 8 or 9 minutes right now. And then when we get home, have some type of way to communicate to your partner and have some type of way that your partner can communicate with you if it's been an especially tough day. And you could have a code word, or you can just say, today was tough. So now we're somewhere around 9 minutes that we've added to our day. It's totally manageable for us to do. Maybe even less, depending on how fast that workout is.
Right.
And then if it has been a tough day and we look at our spouse and say, it's been tough, come up with a system for your spouse, your partner. They're going to give you 10. They're going to give you 20, whatever it is that you guys come up with. And maybe if you have a home gym, you're going to go and do a little bit more weightlifting. Maybe you're going to go for a walk in the neighborhood, take the dog out. Maybe you're going to lay down in your bed and it just be dark and do some breath work. Whatever it is you're going to do, come up with what that is going to look like. And then engage the family life. And the chances of you showing up the way you want to and not screaming over spilled milk are so much higher. And you know what? If you say to your spouse, it's been a tough day, have a system in place where they can look at you and say, I need you now. And usually they give it to you. Usually they give you your 10 or 20 or whatever it is. But right now there's some other emergency that you need to step into. And when we have that way of communicating with each other, you might step in and it was a great day and your spouse looks at you and goes, it was a bad day. And you know that they need the 20. They're going to give you the kids. I recently interviewed a couple, Diane and Davin. Actually, I just interviewed Diane for my podcast. And she runs an organization, a nonprofit here in Washington State. And they have this system in place where they can communicate to each other if one of them had a bad day and the other one knows, I need to step up. And then they reciprocate with each other. And so that's the best thing I can have for us. But
I like that.
You're going to have to practice this stuff, as with anything, as with the couple log that I started laughing at the first couple times we did it. It felt awkward. I didn't want to do it.
Sure.
But I stayed the course and I kept practicing and kept training with it. And now it's a tool that we don't need to look at in front of us. We don't need to look at the piece of paper. We just launch into it and we know how to do it. Just like you know how to attach a fire hose to a hydrant. I don't. I've never trained.
Right.
And my guess is you probably don't know how to search a building. If I gave you a gun and a flashlight, you would probably do okay, but you'd probably also make some critical errors that would put your safety at risk because you haven't trained on it. So let's train on this stuff to transition from work to home and to show up as the best version of ourselves that we can.
Dude, that's powerful. I really appreciate you saying that. There's a lot to that, and I think the transitions are really important. And that's something I've spent time personally on, getting home, doing a meditation in the truck, just trying to make sure I have an intentional stopgap between I'm not at work, I'm going home, I'm playing a different role. And I say playing a different role, I should say fulfilling a different purpose. But there's no more powerful thing than having that intention, to taking that 10 minutes at the station, taking that shower, feeling that workday physically and mentally fall away from us, let it go, get our heart rate going, making that conscious decision in the truck on the way home at that intersection to leave all of that other weight behind us. You can pick it up whenever you need to. So I think that's super powerful. But you also touched on routines. How would you say routines, and I know routines can be anything from the way we brush our teeth to how we put our gear on the truck to our visualization. There's a lot to that, but would you say there's power in adopting routines and having a routine? And I know people say, oh, I fell into a routine. Like, well, if it's not serving you, then maybe update it, but routine is powerful. Would you say?
Yeah, for me it is. I know that there's some personality types that don't do well with routine. And it's just a natural personality type. There's some folks, it's kind of like planning for the vacation. A lot of first responders probably have their hotel booked. They have it mapped out. They have the stuff packed. I mean, they follow a system because that's what we do at work.
Right.
Well, there's some personality types that they don't want to have any of that. They're going to throw a backpack with a few sets of clothes in the car and they're going to hit the road.
See what happens.
And they don't even know where they're going. And if that's your personality type, I love it.
Right.
And even if as a first responder, you do have a routine, but then in your personal life, you don't want to have it because it's too rigid. I love it. But for me, Routines are critical.
Me
So
too.
I woke up this morning. The first thing I did was I got 16 ounces of water. I threw in some primal greens. That's what I use. That was the first thing I drank. No coffee yet. First thing I had was water. I was hydrating my body. Then I got a cup of coffee, went and sat down and started reading the Bible. Got done with that. I started praying. Usually after that, I journal. Today, I made an intentional decision not to because my wife was up. I was talking with her. I was doing some other things.
Sure.
So I intentionally didn't journal this morning and didn't write down my 3 things of gratitude. But a lot of times that's typically what I do next. I journal, write down 3 things I'm thankful for. And usually by that time, it's time to wake up my 7th grader and to start getting ready for the day for myself. And there's more routine that goes in there. So yes, for me, I live and breathe by the routine, and I love it. It makes me feel accomplished. It makes me it guarantees that I do certain things that I want to do to maintain my physical health, my spiritual health, my mental health, which I believe are all tied together. So yeah, getting in good habits, whether you use the word habit or routine,
Sure.
is super strong. Start small though. I like the idea, and I think there's probably a book out there for it. I've heard other people talk about it, habit stacking.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
starting with really small habits, like drinking 16 ounces of water first thing in the morning. I don't think about that. I don't think I've missed a day in 3 years. I had a buddy challenge me to do it for a week, and I haven't stopped.
Nice.
So stacking those really micro habits on top of each other. Yeah, running a marathon is great, but if you haven't ran down to the mailbox in the last year, running a marathon is probably too big. Don't
Right.
start with that. Start with the micro habit first, and if you eventually get to the marathon, I love it. But let's just start by getting out and moving first.
Excellent. Habit stacking. So maybe you drink that water that leads you to the bathroom. That's where you brush your teeth. That's where you practice your mindfulness. Then you get dressed, you put on your uniform with intention, and you set your meaning for the day. Kiss your wife. So all of those things definitely lead to the next event. And I think that's something very critical to look into is habit stacking, especially if your goal is high performance, wellness, and that's really, what we're pushing here. What would you say if somebody needs additional support managing their mental health? Where do they go? Where do they reach out in your experience?
Yeah. So the places I've reached out is typically trained peers
Okay.
and trusted friends. Those are the two people I reach out to first. And then I've always had a mental health professional. I shouldn't say I've always had. I've had a mental health professional in my back pocket most of my professional career. And the times that I didn't, I quickly found one.
Nice.
And I don't look at them as being shrinks. I don't look at them as being whatever else. They are coaches. They are going to coach you in being more mentally fit. And that's going to have an impact on our physical body as well. And so have trained peers, have trusted friends and family, and have a mental health professional. What we're going to be doing with all 3 of those folks is we're going to be talking. But as we talk with them, they're going to help sharpen us and really guide us in the direction that we need to go for the other type of stuff to take care of ourselves.
How would you say you tailor your specific strategies when you're working with people to help fellow first responders and military, fire, and police? What does that look like?
Yeah. It looks like me listening. I try to listen first, and then I try to encourage them. I try to normalize what they went through. Now, if I don't, I try to be careful not to overly relate. So I've done that before.
Okay.
And instead, what it looks like when I'm trying to relate with them by telling them some of my story, sometimes it looks like I'm making it all about me. I've actually had a friend tell me that, Chris, this isn't all about you. And so I took a step back and I was like, wow, that wasn't my intent. My intent was to share some of my story so that you knew you weren't alone. But right now I'm interrupting you and I'm making it all about me. All right, mental note to self.
Yeah, check.
Make sure the other person has a chance to fully see everything. They may not need to hear my story. They maybe only need me to say, that's really normal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's the way I try to start. I try to listen. I try to empathize with them, normalize whatever their response is. If it's normal, if they say, Chris, I was sitting in the corner yesterday with my Glock in my mouth. All right, I'm not going to say, hey, that's totally normal. I am going to say, hey, I've talked with other people about this before. And I have some ideas of where we could start with getting you some help. Can I walk with you on this? So yeah, I think that's a good starting point. Listen, empathize, normalize the normal behaviors. If they share stuff that's not normal, walking with them to that higher level of care so that they can get the help they need.
Yeah, that sounds like what if I was in need, I would want from a friend, a peer, and someone like you. So I appreciate that. What would be basically your final message, your priority traffic to anyone listening when it comes to struggling with your mental health?
Yeah. Give yourself grace. You're going to beat yourself up over this stuff. You're going to feel like a failure as a mom, as a dad, as a husband, as a wife, as a firefighter, as a police officer, as a dispatcher. You're going to feel broken and as a failure. Take a breath. You're not. You're injured. You're injured.
Sure.
So take a breath, give yourself a bunch of grace, and know that you're going to have to keep forgiving yourself over and over and over again, but it's eventually going to stick. You're eventually going to believe, hey, I'm not a failure. I failed at something maybe, but I'm not a failure. And so that's the parting message is love yourself, and not in this flowery, just love yourself. No,
Right,
like legitimately love yourself like you love other people. Give yourself the same break and grace that you give other people. And if we can do that, I think we're going to be well on our way to healing up our brains.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, I really, really appreciate your time this afternoon. Where can everybody get a hold of you? I know you've got some handles on the social medias. Do you mind throwing those out there for us?
Yeah. So for most of my podcast related one, it's That Gravity Podcast. So if you search that on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, you'll find it.
Okay.
On my personal accounts is chris.littrell.5, just because that's what Facebook and Instagram assigned me years ago. I'm probably most active on LinkedIn when it comes to some of this stuff.
Okay.
On there, my tag is Gravity Chris. So whether you find me on there, or go to my website, which is gravityct.com. Any of those are places people can find me.
Excellent. Well, sir, I appreciate all your time. It's been a very enlightening conversation, and hopefully if we have more to talk about in the future, we can jump on and do this again.
Absolutely. Thanks, brother.
Absolutely. Well, everybody, this has been Chris Littrell with Priority Traffic Podcast. And I'm so glad to have you on today. It's been a great conversation, and I look forward to connecting with everybody else soon. Thank you so much, Chris.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Priority Traffic Podcast. Thank you for tuning in and for your commitment to growth, both in your life and in service to others. Remember, this community is here for you, offering support and strategies to help you thrive. Keep the conversation going by connecting with us online. Visit our website to access more resources, follow us on social media platforms for your daily dose of encouragement, and to share this podcast with your colleagues who might benefit from our collective journey towards wellness. Till next time, take the insights from today, let them guide you, and continue to prioritize your well-being. Because you deserve to lead a fulfilling life on and off duty. Stay safe. Stay well.